I got a reason to sing, a reason to dance. I've still got a reason for joy to still clap my hands. I got a reason, not based in believing. It's all 'cause I know who I am. If you knew my story, you know I got a reason to dance. If you knew my story, you know I got a reason to dance. Let's sing that again. I got a reason to sing, a reason to dance. I still got a reason for joy to still clap my hands. Woo! I got a reason, not based in believing. It's all 'cause I know who I am. If you knew my story, you know I got a reason to dance. Woo! Hey! If you knew my story, you know I got a reason to dance. I've got a reason to love, a reason to share. I've still got a reason to build, still reason to care. I got a reason, not based in believing. It's all 'cause I know who I am. If you knew my story, you know I got a reason to dance. If you knew my story, you know I got a reason to dance. Hey, if you knew my story, you know I got a reason to dance. Hey, if you knew my story, you know I got a reason to dance. When I think of all the things I've learned on the greatness of the vast unknown, how could I not be overwhelmed in awe of the majesty being alive right now? When I think of all the things I've learned on the greatness of the vast unknown, how could I not be overwhelmed in awe of the majesty being alive right now? If you
Welcome
knew my
in,
story,
everybody.
you
How are
know
you doing on this wonderful, what is it? Is it a Monday night? Is it a Tuesday? It's a Tuesday. I got to get my days right, man. I don't know whether I am coming or going. It's so nice to see you all jumping in already in the chat. Welcome in, Jude. Oh, got a new subscriber. Love your content. Well, listen, I love you too. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's go, Velvet Bunny. Welcome in tonight. Listen, make sure as you're coming in, because this is going to be a really, really great conversation. Make sure as you're coming in that you like the video. Do that. If you haven't already, make sure to also subscribe to the channel, because that's just a good way to always get notified. Subscribe and then hit the little bell. But then also share this video with anybody who you think might get some value out of a conversation like this. I think this is probably going to be one of the most helpful conversations we've had on this channel, and this is going to be, we're going to be having more live conversations like this. And of course, as you're coming in, let us know where you're watching from, because again, as I always say, you never know. You could be watching like right next door to somebody, and y'all could turn this into a little watch party thing. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, so tonight's conversation is titled Children, Families, and the Future of Secular Community. And this is something that has been A low key, like a hot button issue for me. It's something that when I'm looking at anything we're doing, I'm always wondering, okay, where's the space for children? Like where's the space for families? And I know this gets very complex and complicated at times, but I'm like, man, we really have to be doing a better job at reaching the next generations, creating safe spaces for the next generation. Like there's so much that they're dealing with. There's so many there's a word that I'm trying to look for, but I can't find it. But it's almost like a pressure pipe that they're living in, and they're literally living in the middle of it. And so they deserve safe spaces just as much as us adults. And so I think this is going to be a really good conversation. The one of the through lines of tonight will be, how do we help the next generation think clearly, belong deeply, and grow freely beyond religious control? Because that's where a major part of, I hate to say winning this war, but that's where a major part of winning this war will be. It's not just us, who are older and over the hill now type of thing, but it's also reaching those who are coming up and who are going to inherit the world that we're leaving behind. We should be doing everything we can to equip them with tools that are gonna be helpful for them. Right? Does that make sense? So tonight I'm gonna bring Bob on. Are y'all ready for me to bring Bob on? If y'all are ready for me to bring Bob on, would you put a hell yeah in the chat? And we'll make this thing happen. Now, obviously, I'm not going to wait for you because there might be some type of delay or something, or you just might be one of those people who just don't do what other people tell you to do. And I get it. I'm like that sometimes too. I'm not in your living room, so I can't stop you. So anyway, welcome with us, Bob. Bob, how are you doing this evening?
I'm great, Durante. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm excited that you agreed to be on. You're already helping us do so much behind the scenes with Bridge and now even on the scenes. Yeah.
And I want to jump in, but just because I saw that Jude was in the chat.
Yes.
Just a quick shout out to Jude, because Jude, since you are listening, I listened to her new track, the new song we're working on. Jude is she's the head of our songwriting team. And I listened to the track and really liked it. And she had talked about possibly doing a collaboration vocally, I think.
Yes.
You can tell there's definitely a male vocal line in there. And I kind of was like, I'm trying to write a song myself for my own touring stuff, and I'm about to go on tour. But man, I really liked her song. It's got me thinking I've got to reassess my priorities and see if I can work in some recording, because it really sounds good. I see some male-female harmony vocal possibilities here. But it's a good
that's exciting. Like I light up like a kid when I hear stuff like that, because to me, like that's one of the if there's anything that I miss about being in the church world, it's definitely the musical collaboration and just having that opportunity to do that so frequently.
Right.
And
that's what kept me in. We're going to talk about my deconstruction story, but I will say the tail end, and of course I never journaled, and I kind of wish I would have, so I could have really found here's the moment when exactly I figured stuff out. But I definitely know that, especially when my wife and I moved back to Mississippi. She's from Mississippi originally, and we had lived away for a number of years. We moved back in 2009, and at that point, I hadn't gone into church in years, but we were now moving back into my wife's family's home turf.
Yeah.
She knew she was going to have to, when the question comes up, have you found a church home? Where are you going to church? That was now going to be a question. And also, she was a stay-at-home mom. We moved back when she was expecting our second child. And so she had stopped working. She was a stay-at-home mom. And I knew she needed a social outlet. We were going to have to join a church just so that she would have a place to hang out with other moms and kind of get plugged in. She's from the area of Tupelo, Mississippi, but she had been gone for a decade. And now she's got a kid and one on the way. And so I resigned myself to the idea, okay, we're going to have to join a church. So we started going to a Methodist church. And for my own sanity, I thought, well, if nothing else, I'll play in the praise band.
Yep.
And I would kid her. I would say, I'm likely the only atheist banjo player in a Methodist praise band in the state of Mississippi. But it was largely, it gave me something to do. And it actually was a good thing in the sense that it forced me. I was playing banjo every week.
Wow.
I was, and that's one of the benefits of having that kind of community is that, okay, you know, hey, service is on Sunday and you better have your chops together, you know, kind
That's
of a
right.
thing.
Yep.
Because otherwise, if you're just kind of playing at home recreationally, it can be months and your instrument can be, you know, gathering dust because you're not
Yes.
being forced to pick it up on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's benefit, and so yeah, you know, the fact that that was a fringe benefit of being,
Come on now.
you know, in the church.
Well, listen, for those of you who are listening, now you know it ain't just me who's saying that. Like you've heard Bob say it too. Now it's me and Bob. But the beautiful thing is that that our community is now kind of sparking that type of fire where people can do that again, and where people are creating what I generally call community music. And it's music that it isn't locked into a genre. You get an idea and then you just say, okay, I think I kind of want to do this. So we've done stuff that sounds more anthem like. We've done stuff now that sounds like rock type. And now we're doing this new one has like a real nice country feel to it. And like and it's just opening up more room for other people to participate who are kind of, you know, creatively inclined. And for me, like that's exactly why we build community, is to create the opportunity for those type of things to kind of take place. And I see y'all are going off in this chat. Thank y'all so much for being lively here. I gotta do better at catching up with y'all, man. Y'all are doing something to my reading.
Shout out to Z. He's in the chat there as well. So
Dark Side, Zernial, man, love you, brother. Love you, brother. Feel free to jump in this studio. No, I'm just playing. I'm not gonna put you to work. I promise I'm not. I promise I'm not. All right, so let's kind of get this started, and I'll come back to the chat in just a few. You know, but excuse me, a lot of secular conversations focus on adults who are deconstructing religion, who are leaving church or rebuilding their lives after belief. But if we're serious about building community beyond religion, we eventually have to ask, what about our children? Like, right? What about families? What about education? What about the next generation? And so tonight we're talking with someone who lives at the intersection of all of that, and that's Bob. Bob is an associate professor, secular student organizer.
No. Not associate professor. I'm an instructor. In fact, I got promoted to instructor too, which all that really means is that I'm the dumbest guy in my department. So,
I love that.
I teach in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at Mississippi State University, but I'm one of the guys that does not have a PhD. I'm not the only person who does not have a PhD, but I'm mostly surrounded by PhDs in physics. And so, yeah, educationally, I don't have the same chops that my colleagues do, but what I lack in intelligence, I like to think that I make up in enthusiasm.
You know, I'm going to use that. I'm the dumbest guy in my department. I don't have a department yet, but I'm going to use that for something. I'm going to use that for something. But no, okay, so I stand corrected. Bob is an instructor. So yes. An instructor. Also a secular student organizational faculty advisor. Your father, educator, musician, and now BridgeCity's director of children and families. And so tonight is not just going to be a conversation about raising atheist kids. It's more of a conversation about raising thoughtful, curious, emotionally safe, and intellectually honest kids. So, Bob, before we talk about education, epistemology, campus advocacy, parenting, or even BridgeCity, I want everybody to meet you. Who are you, and what was your journey from belief to non-belief, if you don't mind inviting us into that world?
Right. Okay. Well, and I'll try to give the abridged version, because a couple of years ago I was at a Secular Student Alliance national conference. It was in Little Rock, and there was a Christian podcaster. There was a guy who showed up at the conference, and he was trying to collect people's stories. You know, you could sign up to be interviewed by this guy. His name is Bill Wortman. Am I right? Oh. I think so. Yeah. Turns out he's from Birmingham, Alabama. But anyway, I signed up. And I think we went for like an hour and a half. It's audio only, but I essentially, I
oh snap,
just unloaded on him with my entire story. So I'll try to make it a little bit tighter than the version, but that is available if anybody really needs something to sleep to. You can hear that one. But my background is I'm from Pennsylvania originally, so I'm not from Mississippi originally, and my parents were Gosh, let's see. My mother was raised Catholic, and so I was raised Catholic. Because it turns out my father was a former Jehovah's Witness. He was raised Jehovah's Witness and did the whole knocking on doors, et cetera, et cetera. But by the time I came around, he was no longer really any religion, as far as I knew. So my mother was pretty much the one who did all the religious education for us, and so we went to church. We were out in the middle of very rural Pennsylvania, an area that was not very. There weren't that many Catholics. In fact, our church was kind of like a mission church. The diocese didn't even staff it. It was actually Oblates of St. Francis de Sales
Oh,
staffed our church. So one thing I did pick up early on was that I saw very few people at church on Sunday, at least kids, that I saw in school Monday through Friday, which told
mm,
me that, yeah, we were kind of a minority. I was never, as far as I can tell, or as far as I can recall, I don't think I was ever like really proselytized to or discriminated against by other kids in school. I just kind of recognized that, yeah, like, we had to be, there weren't that many Catholics who went to my public school.
yeah.
Um, so, just kind of, I was raised in the church, and by like third grade, I became an altar boy. I think I always liked being part of the show. I was kind of bored being out in the pews,
Yeah.
and so I started being an altar boy and was an altar boy from like third grade all the way through high school. My parents also split up when I was about in third or fourth grade. They divorced. My mother was this custodial parent, and that divorce, I think, forced her to become even more devout. Because I think
Mm.
when I was really small, it was pretty much just a Sunday thing. We were regular church attenders, and in fact, I was the one kid who my mother would make sure we did our Sunday school lessons on Saturday night. So we didn't necessarily have, we didn't have Bible readings Monday through Friday. I think we would say like bedtime prayers. I can't recall if we had grace or anything like that. But after my parents got divorced, my mother definitely did turn much more devout.
Yeah.
Where there was a lot of regular Bible reading, and there was Guidepost magazine, and we would say grace. And I remember her at one point. She wanted to just get away. I think the shock of the divorce. She thought, let me just move across the country. And I
Yeah.
remember like we were like praying and like rolling dice. It was really kind of weird, like trying to choose where our destination was, but she was going to just let it up to God, where we wound
Wow.
up. So it was, and she got very ecumenical at that time as well. She started to form friends, and of course, not having that many Catholic friends, you had to find Protestant friends.
Yeah.
And we started going to some like tent meetings, tent revivals. I remember we went to a church that was joined the James Dobson Focus on the Family video
Yes.
series, all these kind of things. So we were being exposed to more in the way of religiosity and an ecumenical version of religiosity through my probably like preteen and into my teen years. And I continued to be an altar boy, et cetera, et cetera. Got to the end of high school and was making that college decision. And I had applied to the University of Scranton, which is a Jesuit private university in Northeast Pennsylvania. And our priest, a guy named Father Larry, his name was Tony Larry, and Father Larry was my priest for many years. And when I told him that I'd gotten into Scranton, or maybe my mother told him that I was going to Scranton, um, he said he'll either come out as an atheist or he'll come out as a priest. And um, and so, I went to Scranton, and there it was a different environment in the sense that everybody was Catholic. you know, uh, and I don't know if I was that much of a like freshman year. I can't recall how much I attended church, um, but I probably went, occasional Sundays. It was kind of a social thing, but as far as I could tell, everyone else was Catholic. And of course, I was being taught by several priests. I took calculus with Father Levko, who was a great calculus teacher. Um, And so through the years in college, I kind of waxed and waned as far as my religiosity would go. By my junior year, I took a class called Faith and Reason with a guy named Father Kosha, and he introduced me to Thomas Merton. And if anybody's not familiar with
Hmm.
Thomas Merton was a Catholic. It turned out to be a Catholic monk. He was born in England, but he moved to the States when he was a teenager and was educated here in the States. And he wrote a book called The 7-Story Mountain way back in the 40s or 50s. And he eventually, by the 50s, he wound up at a monastery in Kentucky, and that's how he spent the rest of his life. He was in a monastery, and he eventually became a hermit. Like, he got special privileges because he was a monk, but he was also a writer. And the monastery was making money off of these books. The 7-Story Mountain was a fairly, it was a fairly popular book within Catholic circles back in the 50s. And then he continued to write books on prayer, contemplation. He did a lot. The monks pray all the time, and so he just kept on publishing, and the monastery was making money, and so they let him sort of be a hermit within the monastery grounds. They kind of set up a hermitage for him. And so I just found this really fascinating. I was learning more and more about this guy. And so, like, my junior year and my senior year, I would say I was getting more and more religious. I was reading as much Thomas Merton as I could. And my college room, my roommate, my senior year, it turns out that he wound up, the spring of our senior year, we were both physics majors. I knew him from freshman year, and I assumed he was going to be a high school physics teacher like his dad was, because he was going the physics education track, and student teaching, et cetera, et cetera. But come the spring of our senior year, he was like, would you mind writing a recommendation letter for me, because I'm applying to the seminary. I want to be a priest. And that was, to a certain extent, kind of shocking to me, in the sense that he was very conservative. Like, he didn't go out drinking like the rest of us did. He wasn't, he was kind of, he was kept his cards close to his vest. So it became quite a surprise that he wound up entering the priesthood. But he went off and did his thing. I graduated as well, not really knowing what I wanted to do. I did a year of graduate school in electrical engineering, which was not, obviously I'm not an electrical engineer, so that didn't pan out. But I eventually wound up teaching. I taught physics, high school physics in Maryland for a couple of years. And even when I was in Maryland, when I first moved for my first full-time job as a teacher, I joined a Catholic church. It was kind of, I was still reading Merton at that time, and obviously I joined the church partly for community. And at that point, I was also playing music. I didn't play music until after college. I picked up a guitar, and so now all of a sudden, I was enjoying playing guitar, and so I joined a church, and that gave me a chance to join the praise band, as well as, of course, I was trying to meet girls, et cetera, et cetera. So I was there definitely for a social component. But I think at the time, I was also still, I think I was a believer. It's kind of tough for me to remember when I discarded a lot of the supernatural stuff. And that was part of maybe the fascination with Thomas Merton, was that Thomas Merton was somehow, he was writing all these books about prayer and contemplation. I thought, well, maybe I'm just not doing things right. And maybe he's tapped into something. And one of the things that really was important to me was when Thomas Merton's journals were released. So he died in 1968. Accidentally. He was at a Buddhist monastery in Thailand, and had given a talk in the morning, went back to his little cabin to take a shower, and he was going to come back for questions and answers in the afternoon. And he apparently touched a fan that was not grounded as he got out of the shower. He was wet, and he was electrocuted. So he died in 1968. And all of his, he had all these published works, but he also had his own personal journals. He journaled every day. And his journals were under lock and key for 25 years post death. But then, sure enough, once the 1993 to 1995 rolled around, of course, he was still a pretty popular author, and the church realized, hey, we can make money releasing volumes of these guys' journals. And so I started to, as they were published, I would read them. I would get them out of the public library. And the more I read, especially these journals, and this is not edited for publication to the masses, and the more I read these, the more I realized this was just a very psychologically confused human being. The bloom was coming off the rose at that point. I realized he wasn't plugged into anything, and that was a really important time, for me to realize, even the prayer stuff doesn't make any sense. It's not tapping into anything. There's perhaps nothing out there. But again, I still stayed in for the music and the girls. And I wasn't meeting that many girls. That was the weird thing. But I taught for a couple of years in Maryland, and then I went back to graduate school to study meteorology because I decided I wanted to be a TV weatherman. So that took me to Penn State University. Again, I show up in a new location. I joined a church. I joined the Catholic campus ministry. Got involved with their kind of praise band, et cetera, et cetera. And did that through my graduate school. And at this point, the other interesting thing was not only was I there for the music and the girls, but it was also at that point politically conservative. I think I was essentially very much in line with the politics of the Catholic Church.
Wow.
So therefore, I was outside the abortion clinic in State College, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And that's a tough thing to admit at this point in my life. But that's what it. I was, and it actually kind of kept me in. I thought I'm a good person because I think this way. I felt morally superior, if nothing else. And so after graduate school, I got my first full-time TV job in Fort Smith, Arkansas. That's when I finally, I think, got to the point where I thought, I'm going to run an experiment. My shirt says, "Want results? Try the scientific method." This is an experiment on me. I thought, I'm going to move to this place 1,500 miles away from anything I've known. I don't know anybody in Fort Smith, Arkansas. I'm going there just for the job. And I'm also pretty far removed from my mother.
Yeah.
And so she's not going to know what I'm doing or what I'm not doing. I'm not going to go to a church. I'm going to show up in this new location and see if I can meet those needs outside of a church. And sure enough, apart from the fact that I was now moving to the deep South, or at least the mid South, and the first person I met at the TV station, her first question was, "What's your name?" Second question is, "Have you found a church home yet?"
Yep.
That was a new experience for me coming from Pennsylvania. I said, most of my friends, I didn't know where they went to church, if they went to church growing up. Whereas here, all of a sudden, I'm being, essentially accosted. "Have you found a church home yet?" But very quickly, I started playing tennis with the camera operator, and played golf with some other, I kind of found this little, social circle within my own workplace, and the rest is sort of history in the sense that I never went back. And I would say by age 30, I would have labeled myself. I wouldn't have considered myself a Catholic because I was doing nothing Catholic at all. I would have labeled myself an atheist. In the sense that I didn't care what people believed. I knew I didn't believe anything, but what other people believed, they're welcome to do that as well. And I lived many years that way. And that's how I met my wife around that same time period. And she was pretty well aware that I didn't hold any particular religious beliefs. She had been raised Southern Baptist. One important plot point, which folks in the chat may certainly may not know and may find this very interesting, is that my mother, who, like I said, turned very devout after her own divorce, and she went to 12 years of parochial school. She was the oldest of 6 children in her family, and she had 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and all of her sisters had married in the church. My mother did not, because she married at the time a Jehovah's Witness, and they married just justice of the peace kind of thing. And obviously my mother considered her own marriage a failure, in the sense that it ended in divorce and was never formally recognized by the church. In fact, my mother, she wouldn't go to communion when I was growing up. I would go to communion, but she would not, because she didn't feel, even though the priest would tell her, it's okay, but she felt like she had broken the rules of the church by marrying outside of the church, that it was not a formal marriage. Well, anyway, her sisters had all married within the church. They had actually all married guys named Richard as well. I've got 3 Uncle Richies, and so my mother, I think, regretted her decisions, her choices. And when my brother and I were in our teens, she would say, "If you marry outside the church, I will disown you." And so now all of a sudden I meet this girl raised Southern Baptist, and I propose to her. She accepts. I tell my mother the good news, and that's pretty much the last contact I had with my mother.
Wow.
There's been maybe a funeral or two where we've been in the same orbit, but for the most part, I've been disowned. This has now been my wife. We're coming up on our 24th wedding anniversary, so it's been about 25 years, essentially,
Now,
that my mother
can I
no
ask just
contact.
like how have you coped with that? Like, because like
Yeah,
that's your mom, that it was
right,
your custodial parent growing up.
right.
How do you what was there one part of you that just said, hey, that wanted to say, hey, I can't marry you because my mom will never talk to me again? Or like what was that process like for you?
Yeah, no, I never thought I'm not going to I was never going to knuckle under, and because to a certain extent, to me, it's just so. I think it was very unbelievable in the moment. I thought, there's no way she's serious about this,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, a birthday would pass.
Wow.
Just months would go on where, and I think early on I was trying to call, and it would just be voicemail or at that point recording machine, just no contact. And then eventually, of course, 5 years in, I think we had our son, our first son. And I think we sent pictures returned, and I did eventually get one letter from her where it said essentially, "You're the biggest disappointment of my life." That's a
Man.
tough thing to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one wants to hear that. Um, and I think at that point I just realized, wow. Uh, and this is about it's kind of funny that when I got that letter, this was at about the same time period that I had I was no longer teaching high school. I'd done I should mention it. I'd done my decade as a weatherman. I did
Yeah.
TV weather. I did some other things in meteorology. But then my wife and I had moved to Mississippi, and I'd gotten back into teaching. I taught high school, and then I taught community college, and I was teaching. In fact,
Dude.
the reason why I got the community college gig was because spring break of 2010, I had been teaching adjunct with the community college.
Yeah.
Spring break of 2010, I got a call from the division chair because I wasn't actually I was teaching high school. And they didn't have a class for me, but I got a call from the division chair saying, we've had a tragedy in the department. Coach Ken Nowicki, had dropped dead spring break of
Oh,
2010 in front of his own kids. He was like 46 or 47 at the time.
yikes.
And he was teaching an astronomy class. It met once a week in the evenings. And the division chair was like, we're halfway through a semester and we've got no one to finish this class. And
Bob,
like I
God
said,
killed somebody to give you a job.
you could look at it that way, couldn't you? And so, she was like, would you take on that class? And so I said, sure, despite the fact that I'd never taken, much less taught, an astronomy class. I had an
Yeah.
amateur interest in astronomy, but I had never formally taught it. And so
Wow.
I go in, I finish out the semester, I apply for the job full time, and I got it. And so now all of a sudden I'm teaching astronomy. And one of the first semesters I was teaching, like I said, it was pretty close to when I got that letter from my mother. I had a student who nearly dropped my class. We got to Big Bang cosmology, and she came up to me after the class and she was like, I'm sorry, but what you're teaching me conflicts with what I was raised. I was raised fundamentalist Christian, and this is just in diametric opposition to what I've been taught." And I was kind of shocked
Wow.
because when I was teaching high school, I always felt bad for certain colleagues. I felt bad for the English teacher
Yeah.
because the English teacher, they had to come up with a reading list. It was gonna
Yeah.
it was gonna piss somebody off, right?
Yes.
The history teacher, whose history do you teach? The biology teacher who's next to me, how much evolution could they get away with?
Yeah.
So I always feel bad for these people. For me, as a physics teacher, and it's Newton's laws. There's a
Yeah.
lot of white European males, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's never really an issue. But now all of a sudden, I'm teaching astronomy, and I've got one of those issues, one of those topics where I'm encountering resistance from a student, and in the moment, I kind of mollified her.
Yeah.
I just because she was an A student, and I had her sister for like 2 different classes, and her sister was a great student, and I didn't want to lose her, and so I said, if you need to, just learn it and dump it, at the end
Yeah.
of the semester. And I just felt so dirty in the moment because this
Man.
was a learning opportunity, a teachable moment that I completely shanked, and
I get it.
it kind of forced, but it was also kind of a wake up call to me that, man, like, people don't just believe this stuff; they're actually acting on it. She was going to
Yes.
make she was going to make a decision that could affect her educational trajectory,
Yeah.
based on a belief. And the same thing with my mother. Whatever
Mhm.
this crazy beliefs that she has, she's willing to cut out flesh and blood for something that, as far as I can tell, does not exist.
Yeah.
And so
Man.
it really did bring to the forefront the fact that beliefs do inform actions. And this is
Yep.
when I kind of made the shift from being an apatheist, where I let people do whatever they want, to, well, let's start to examine these beliefs, because if
Yeah.
these beliefs are indeed affecting your actions, then I want to make sure those beliefs are true. Not just
Yep.
yours, but my own.
Yep.
And that's when and it just so happened that around the same time period, when I was getting more interested in learning about critical thinking skills, and then all of a sudden I stumbled across street epistemology and street
Yes.
epistemology videos, and this is just oh, it was just perfect, because I started to watch these, and this gave me more exposure to more people who were holding all kinds of beliefs.
Mhm.
um, and then the question is, well, how can you start to have conversations? You just can't call them crazy beliefs. You got to
Yeah.
actually interrogate them a little bit, and determine how that person got there, and if
Yeah.
and is it possible for them to perhaps discard those beliefs. And they're not going to discard them by being yelled at or being called stupid or crazy.
Right.
So is there a different way of approaching them?
Man.
So
Okay, like one of the things that I find really interesting about your story so far is that like you've experienced a lot, number one, like wow. But then also just number two, your deconstruction journey doesn't have, at least from what I'm hearing, doesn't have like that trauma pull that you normally get with it. Like, I stopped believing and my world shattered, and like just and I had to cry in the closet for a few weeks because like there's no God here to protect me. What was it? Because I know it's part of it is just that that it was a gradual process for you. But what is it that you think about you where this God hypothesis wasn't as impacting, where it didn't cause you to just like go through that crisis of faith part where it impacts you so heavily, unless I missed that part?
right. No, I mean, and the weird thing is that I would label myself as being pretty devout. Like I said,
Yeah.
I'm reading, about a monk. In fact, I went to the monastery that Thomas Merton, as a vacation, like after college. A different buddy of mine, we drove to Kentucky to go to a monastery for a week, on a retreat. Um, so I was pretty heavy in fact, while I was teaching high school in Maryland, I actually reached out to a couple of vocation directors, because I knew, when I was teaching, I thought, do I really want to do this for 30 years? Or
Yeah.
if I, or maybe I could do this, and I thought, well, maybe the reason why I'm not feeling fulfilled is because maybe I should be doing this in a religious school. Maybe I could be a priest and be a teacher at the same time. And, so I played around with vocation directors. That's not, I would say I was pretty deep in, but
Yeah.
thankfully never pulled the trigger. Because I think there was definitely something that was, I thought, I'm not convinced that this is actually real. I think that
Yeah.
was always probably in the back of my mind that kept me from, fully committing to
Yeah.
anything and along those lines. But no, as far as, like any kind of traumatic, no, apart from, one thing I did discover was, as I walked away from the religion, man, a lot of those political ideas also
Yeah.
started to change. Uh,
Yep. Yep.
uh, and I didn't realize it in the moment how closely the two were tied.
Yeah.
And once I was able
For
to start
sure.
wiggling the one that, the one block in the Jenga tower, then the rest of them were able to fall apart. Uh,
When you mentioned like, hey, I would have been one of the people outside the abortion clinics back then. And I was thinking like, I think it was around 2006. This is when Barack Obama was running against a guy named Alan Keyes for a Senate position.
yep,
And I was like 100% Alan Keyes, primarily because of his stance on abortion,
right, yep, yeah,
and he did a really good job of selling it to me, like, because it was
right,
just like, it's killing the black community, and it's like, hey, you're right, it is, like, and I did not realize how much my religion predisposed me to that bandwagon,
right, right.
but I say that to say like, no, I would have been right there with you. We would have been on that same we would have been there together. And that's the beauty of growth. That's why I do, and y'all don't get mad at me for saying this. This is why I do try to not to judge people too harshly. And maybe this is some of my carryover from religious baggage, but it's the idea of like, no, I remember who I was when I was a believer, and I know why I was.
Perhaps the one benefit, that I count from that experience is that it does give me a tremendous amount of compassion and empathy.
Yes.
Yeah, because we have these protesters. These protesters come on campus. We have a group called Consuming Fire, and they have the mean old signs, and they've got the aborted fetuses, and that sort of thing. And my secular student group, our little group me lights up when these people are on campus. But I usually try to advise students to not be confrontational, and partly is because gosh, what, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that would have been that was me.
Yep.
And so they won't perhaps necessarily be that way forever, and certainly they're not. It's not going to do any good to get into a yelling match with them. So
that doesn't help. That doesn't help. So just kind of diving into your career a little bit, what drew you into education as a career? Was teaching always the plan for you?
No, teaching was definitely an afterthought. I never I finished college with a bachelor's degree in physics, and then a kind of a failed year in electrical engineering. And then the question was, well, how am I going to make a living with a bachelor's degree in physics? And and perhaps because my college roommate he went the education route, at least initially. He was part of the physics, like I said, he had done the student teaching in college. So at that point, for me, I had to sort of go back to school and essentially get a certification. I perhaps could have been emergency certified, but actually I went back to Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania, and I took the educational psychology class, and I took some other sciences. I took a chemistry class. I remember taking an environmental class. I was trying to beef up my science background in order to be a general science person, because it's tough to get a job if you're just a physics certification. Because quite often a school, especially rural schools, they don't have enough physics classes to fill out your schedule. They can't hire you full time. So I wound up getting I got a physics and general science certification. That allowed me to teach physical science and earth science and principles of technology. It allowed me to do a lot wider range of classes. But I taught for a couple of years in Maryland, and I enjoyed it, but I also realized, man, it's a lot of work, and I wasn't sure if it was just tough to see yourself doing this for 30 years. I wasn't, and I had a student who I asked the class, hey, what do you guys want to do when you grow up? And Matt Spackman, he said, I want to be a TV weatherman. And that had never crossed my mind, but I thought, wow, I've always wanted to do broadcasting. I've got all the science in my background. Why not give it a shot? So that's what got me into meteorology for a decade.
That's wild.
And then I left weather, and I got back, and then I came back to the classroom, because one of the beauties of being a teacher is that, or having it in your background, is that in the event that you do have some shifting sands professionally, having that quiver in your that arrow in your quiver is useful, because there's almost always a school. And if you have taught an upper level science or an upper level math, there's almost always a job.
Wow.
And I got back into teaching. Like I said, I taught high school for a year in Mississippi. Then I transitioned to the community college. I taught for a decade at the community college, both online, and then I eventually wound up getting more of a lead online instructor, but I did some traditional teaching as well. And I moved to the university in 2019. But those two different teaching careers with the meteorology in the middle, I'm a different teacher. And I'm not sure if it was just being at a different stage in life. At that point, I was a father. I just looked at education a lot more seriously and a lot differently, I would say.
That makes sense. Like, man, okay, that's just fascinating that a student asks, when you ask a student, like, hey, I want to be a weatherman. Oh, that does sound cool. I think I'm going to do that.
When a teacher asks that question, that sometimes or an adult asks that question, quite often they're fishing for ideas for themselves.
I want to see that in a skit now, where a teacher literally does that, and as soon as they hear the idea they want, all right, I quit, and just walk out of the room. That's what I was looking for. That is awesome. That is awesome. You mentioned street epistemology before, and of course, epistemology is kind of the study of how we know what we think we know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
when you use the word epistemology, what do you mean in normal people language, and why does that attract you?
Oh, I think what it means is essentially why do you believe what you believe?
Yeah,
So you kind of framed it quite nicely, and I think it's because, like I said, I and maybe it was late in life, maybe I was just kind of too slow to pick up on it, but I started to realize, wow, like these beliefs that people hold, they really do inform their actions, and those actions impact certainly themselves, but also quite often other people.
yeah,
And maybe it was the significance of being disowned by my own mother that was a real kind of wake up call to me that wow, um, I, it's really important for me at this stage of my
yeah,
game in the game.
yeah,
Um, it's really important for me that we share reality,
mhm,
and and quite often your belief system is kind of describes the reality you're experiencing. And if your beliefs are way different than mine, then how can we ever have a conversation? How can we move forward as a species
yeah,
if we're that far if we're reading off of different sheets of music?
yeah. No, that makes perfect sense to me, and it just kind of gave me a thought. Like, if religions were truly honest, they'd teach epistemology.
Yes.
Like they'd want you to have a way to interrogate, what you believe, but they only give apologetics, which is a way to defend the beliefs
Right.
they've
Right.
already given you.
Yeah, and,
um,
one of the nice things in my current teaching position, like I said, I'm the dumb guy, which means that I teach the general education classes in my department,
yeah,
which the PhDs they don't want to teach the classes that I teach
yeah,
because I essentially I wind up teaching the non-science majors. I teach the people who are just taking this because it's a science credit. So
yeah,
I've got the marketing majors and I've got the history majors and I've got the art majors, and I am not a priority for them.
yeah,
On there, which is completely understandable. But I go into the class kind of recognizing that,
yeah,
um, and that I'm not going to convert them to being physicists or engineers by the end of the semester. Um, yeah, and so for me, what I've kind of made really important is, and perhaps as a reaction to that one astronomy student who nearly dropped my class, I started to really focus on critical thinking skills.
yeah,
How can I test their critical thinking skills? How can I model critical thinking skills
mhm,
for them and show them the benefits of interrogating things that you think are true? And what are the methods you would use if you were curious about how would I test this?
yeah,
You really be explicit, because in my mind that's going to pay off. Whether they remember that Newton's third law is about action and reaction is relatively unimportant for an accountant. So,
yeah,
um, but can they test their idea? If they're going to be approached with with an auto loan or a home loan, or they're
yeah,
and can they critically think through and make sure that they don't want it being taken by people who are trying to sell them a bill of goods.
yeah,
Those are and certainly they're going to be voters, or hope they're going to be voters. And can they see through the smokescreen of the Allen Keys who want you to be
yep,
a one issue voter?
yep,
Um, could they actually challenge these claims that these people make? Um,
yes,
that's all about critical thinking, and those skills aren't they're not just something you just open out of a box. These are things
mhm,
that you have to hone and practice.
yeah,
And so that's actually part of my instruction. And on my YouTube channel, I actually have a series of videos that I've made that I call the critical thinking skills series, and I've done 8 of them so far, and I'm actually going to be the subject of number 9. Um,
ooh,
this is news to you. You don't know about this either because I
no,
haven't made the video yet. But there's something that has happened within the last year
yeah,
that I thought I was correct about, and it
wow,
turns out I'm not.
ooh, that's always fun.
Yeah, and to me that's really exciting.
Yes,
To other people that's very very scary.
mhm,
But to me that's actually that's where I live, and I find that this becomes very useful in teaching to my students when I'm the patsy. When I'm the person and I think about why we believe what we believe a whole heck of a lot. And even so, I can still fall prey to logical fallacies
Yeah.
and confirmation bias and motivated reasoning. These are just things that are just so tough to. I like to use the expression that certainty is psychologically seductive. It feels so good to think that you're right about something.
Yes.
And I try to resist that, but man, it's just we're hardwired for it. I think evolutionarily, there's reasons why, and but I think all too often, it's best the moment you think that you're certain about something, that's the moment you need to start asking questions about why am I so confident about that?
Absolutely. I think that was a major moment for me, is realizing, and I've shared this story on this channel several times, just having this moment watching this thing that was like a mockumentary type of thing, but I thought it was a real documentary on mermaids, and then just getting to the end of it and realizing like, oh, I don't actually have a way of, like, I believe bullshit, basically, is what, like, the conclusion that I came to. And it was because like what I noticed was the shortcut in the process that I took. I watched something, they said it was true, and I believed them. And I realized, like, oh no, because that's actually how I've been living my life. Like, things are true because they sound true, not because they are true. I'm not doing the work to discover if they are true. I'm not doing the work to verify if they are true. I'm not even asking the question if I'm interested enough to know if this is true or not. I'm just assuming this sounds good. And so, hey, or this looks good, or this must be true. And I realized, oh, this is a critical flaw in how I approach the world. And if I expect to make better decisions, like, I have to start dealing with that right now. And that's partly like one of the reasons, like, that's why I was so interested in your process. My deconstruction journey did not include like this breakdown or crisis of like, oh no God. Like, I didn't go into a nihilistic depression. Like, it was actually quite liberating for me. It was,
absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah. I remember years ago, I'm trying to think who the host was. There was a host on the atheist community of Austin. V was her first name. And she was talking about how the feeling of like having to constantly run software in order to make a lot of this make sense from a religious perspective. If you're a believer, but you're kind of constantly dealing with this cognitive dissonance that, you're like, this is not actually the way reality works. But and so your brain is kind of working overtime. It's kind of in the background. It's got to like make this all make sense. And once you can actually turn off that part of your brain, from doing that stuff, man, it just opens it up to thinking about other stuff so much more clearly.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in a drama 101 class, and it's like my freshman year of college. It was Dr. Bill Lipscomb who was doing the presentation, and he introduced me to the terminology suspended disbelief, or suspension of disbelief. And I never heard that phrase ever in my life. I remember him explaining it, and it just wasn't intuitive for me. It's almost like falsifiability. When I hear that, I'm like, I think I know what it means, but I don't really know what that means. So help me understand. The words just don't pop out like that. So when he explained suspension of disbelief, he's like, it's the thing you do when you go to the movies and you pretend Superman can fly, even though people can't fly, but you do it so you can enjoy the experience. And by that moment, I had already been in ministry for 2 decades. And like, I remember how hard that phrase shook me, because I realized you just described what I've been doing for the past half decade of my life.
Yeah.
That I'm pretending miracles can happen so that I can enjoy this experience,
Right.
Oh, it's mind blowing. Okay.
When you were talking about at the risk of mentioning Richard Dawkins' name.
Understood, yes.
In The God Delusion, he tells a story about there was a colloquium. He's from England, and from a Department of Evolutionary Biology. They were doing a colloquium, a professional presentation. And the invited speaker was, I think, if I recall the story correctly, the invited speaker was an American biologist who was going to come over and give a talk. And the talk was related to the field of study of one of Richard Dawkins' colleagues, another senior professor. And this guy had been working his whole life on whatever this niche area of evolutionary biology was. Well, this American guy comes over, and the talk that he presented essentially overturned this other dude's life's work. And as Dawkins describes in The God Delusion, at the end of the talk, this other senior professor was the first one to applaud and congratulate this American professor.
Yes, I remember this story now.
Yeah, and I've always thought, man, I hope that story is true. Like,
Yeah.
I have no way of knowing, because he didn't name who it was. It could just be a story.
Yeah,
Man, it's got a good moral. As a scientist, I love to think that's the way science works. But this experience that I've had in the past year, which I'm going to be the star of this critical thinking video, is essentially that. Like, I don't care if Dawkins' story is true or not now, because I actually know like a very similar kind of story where, like I was 100% confident, that I was correct until I discovered something, which has now caused my confidence to drop significantly. And like we were saying, not only there's two benefits to it. One benefit is that now I understand the science so much better. There was something I was missing. Essentially, that turned out to be kind of a confirmation bias, which made me miss the physics going on here. But it also helped me to examine the psychology of why was I so confident to begin with.
Yes.
I give there's been another situation. In fact, it has to do with a glass of water. And an index card. I can't do it live because I don't have a CD case. I usually do a CD case, but if you take a glass of water and you put a CD case on top of it and you turn it upside down, the CD case will hold. Like, it's not going to fall. Okay, and many in the audience probably have seen this done before, and it's a pretty common physics demonstration. And I did this back in like 2012 for a community college physical science class, and gosh, man, I really wish I could do this live.
I know it, right?
I should have been prepared. But you'll take my word that the CD case does hold. And the question is, why does it hold up?
Yeah.
You want to think about it? You want to offer? There's no wrong answer.
I am not going to embarrass myself. No, I'm going to let the expert speak.
Well, the explanation that I gave in that moment was that it's atmospheric pressure. The fact that the atmosphere, which is all these atoms on top of us, all these molecules, they constantly push on us with a force of 14.7 pounds per square inch. And therefore, that air pushing up on that card is enough to hold up that little bit of water.
Yeah.
Okay? I gave that explanation, was about to move on, when a hand went up from the back of the class. And a guy named Aaron Freppen asked a really, really important question. And the question was, what if that cup was just, what if there was no water in it? What if it was just air? And now all of a sudden I was faced with the idea that, well, gosh, I just said that the atmosphere is pushing up enough on the bottom of that index card, or that CD case, that would hold up a thing of water.
Yeah.
That weighs a lot more than a cup full of air. Little column of air it should be holding it up even more effectively, right?
Yeah.
So this is falsification. You're saying, so he was able to give me a very tangible example of where my explanation didn't hold water, pun intended. and that was a crucial moment in my own teaching, as well as my humanity, right? It definitely changed me as a human being, because and that's why I call this the Freppen objection, because wow, I'd never thought about it that way. And so not only did I wound up, because it was a very sincere question. He's like, well, what's going on there? He wanted to believe me. He wanted to be on my team, but he couldn't get over this idea that he had in his head that wasn't explained by my explanation.
Yeah.
And so it's such a beautiful thing. And so so I looked into it and I developed a whole lecture about it. And this is actually one of the lectures that is part of my critical thinking series, because not only through further exploration did I learn the physics better, but I also was forced to reckon with, well, why was I so confident to begin with?
Yeah.
And I realized, I think I saw that little trick, like when I was about 7 years old, getting a Cub Scout magic trick merit badge, right?
Yes.
And if I could go back in time and find that manual, I think it would probably said something about air pressure. And then I got to high school. I took a physics class, and the teacher did that demonstration, said it was atmospheric pressure. Went to college, saw that demonstration, heard that same explanation. I was out teaching physics, and I was teaching from a textbook from Paul Hewitt. Paul Hewitt is a legend in physics education, and I found one of his videos on YouTube. Did the same demonstration, gave the same explanation. If anybody knows the physics, it's got to be Paul Hewitt.
Yeah.
And so I realized, yeah. And of course, as a meteorologist, I know a lot about atmospheric pressure. Like, it makes physical sense to me. I had no reason to question it until Aaron Freppen did. Because and I realized, oh, well then, up until that time, every time I did that demonstration and it worked, and that was just like I was confirming something I already believed to be true. Like, I was reinforcing something that turns out to not be correct. And I came to realize, and so this is why it's a really important lesson to teach my students, is that wow, how often do we, especially in this world of social media, how do we go out and we actually select things that confirm things we already believe to be true? We count those things as evidence. And it actually, in many cases, leads you farther and farther away from the truth, because you get more and more confident. Oh yeah, I've got the tiger by the tail. And that's why there's beauty in trying to disconfirm yourself. And that's what the scientific method really, that's what scientists should be doing, is trying to actually falsify their ideas first. Because all it takes is one Aaron Freppen, then all of a sudden, my confidence that it's atmospheric pressure, solely atmospheric pressure, is pretty low.
Man. Well, like I think that's probably one of the scariest things about the time that we're living in now, because we are getting access to more information, and not just access, but some of us are like, we're learning more, we're knowing more, but at the same time, I don't know if we're wrestling with how much of what we know is borrowed certainty, of how much of what we know is just inherited scripts. I think we forsake the difference between things we actively learned and passively learned. Because those things that we actively learned are those things that do get challenged. It's those things that we go down the rabbit hole looking for information to support or to not support. But things that we passively learned is mostly things that we learned a long time ago that sound true, that can be grouped into those things as common knowledge. But from a sociological perspective, what we often think of as common knowledge is not common for everybody. It changes from group to group, from culture to culture, from topic to topic. Like, even within one type of homogenous culture, from topic to topic, what is common knowledge can change. And so and it's almost frightening, because and this is why epistemology is so important, because we do believe so many things just because we heard them. We do believe so many things just because we've held these beliefs for so long. Now, so you seem really excited when you realize, like, oh, nah, I was wrong. Like, no, okay. Because go ahead.
And the one that's freshest in my mind, like I said, it will be the subject of critical thinking video number 9. I believe for the better part of a year, and I became aware of a new piece of information, and I had been on the record. Like, I did. This is the talk that I gave to the Unitarians. Just back in February, and all of a sudden in March, I learned something brand new, which caused me to change my mind. And that first night, I learned this new piece of information, like the afternoon of, I think it was March 30th, I think is the actual date. Or maybe it was in the evening. I couldn't sleep that night. And my wife, she was like, what's going on? What's wrong? And I was like, I'm not right about this. Like, I'm mistaken. And you know what she did? She filed for divorce. No, she didn't. Right? She just rolled over. I was like, oh, all right, you're wrong again. No big deal.
No big deal.
And then, and of course, my kids were aware of this. This has been an ongoing thing. It's something I've been loving to talk about. First thing I had to do the next morning, serving them breakfast, giving them their cornflakes. Oh, I was mistaken about that. You know what they did? They kept on eating their cornflakes, right? It was not a big deal.
Yes.
But the initial shock, no one, it is like, and the beauty of it is, I believe this for less than a year, and a relatively few number of people were aware that I believe this to be true.
Yeah.
And this gives me a huge amount of empathy for how many people have been locked into holding a belief
Oh,
for
yes.
decades, right? And now they're starting to ask those questions and starting to feel a little less confident.
Mhm.
I know how that feels, right?
Yeah.
And for them, it could cost them their marriage.
Yep.
Their kids might not talk to them,
That's
right?
right.
Or maybe it's something that they have taught their own kids to be true.
Yeah.
That now they're starting to think, I'm not sure if it's true or not. Man, so it was actually
Dude.
really important to me to have that recent experience because, like I said, that was kind of the Aaron Freppen moment, and now I've got a
Yeah.
brand new, fresh one because the Aaron Freppen thing was a decade ago. Today is Aaron Freppen's birthday, by the way, and
All right.
Aaron Freppen texted me just like I'd wished him a happy birthday. He texted me right before we went live today.
What? Happy birthday, Aaron Freppen.
Because like Aaron Freppen, I don't stay in touch with many students.
Yeah.
Post, that's just the way it goes. I talk to it, but Aaron Freppen was such an important person to me. He'll never know the impact that he had on me, and so I try to make it clear to him.
Man.
And Aaron actually, he went through the reason why I also stay in touch with him. He actually had a near life-ending motorcycle accident about maybe 6 years ago that left him in a coma for months. He's still kind of working back to 100%. But I've gone to visit him within the past year and a half or so, just because he was just so integral to where I'm at now. But like we were saying though, as far as like the empathy, it's a good reminder that I'm someone who thinks about epistemology a whole heck of a lot, and yet I can fall prey to that certainty, that psychologically seductive certainty.
That's how easy it is, and I think we should. I don't think we should be forgetting that anytime soon. That like, no, we're all vulnerable. That was one of the things that I really kind of started planting my flag on early on. Is like, hey, when we're learning these logical fallacies and learning these cognitive biases, we shouldn't just be learning them to call out other people's stuff.
Right.
We need to be learning them to filter ourselves, to interrogate our own, because like the moment you realize it's a phenomenon, the moment you have language for it, and like I know our culture is immediately to say, I got one on somebody else now. It's like a better use of that tool is to start using it on yourself. Like, okay, this is something that, because that was my approach. It's like, and that's how I begin to realize, like, oh yeah, I have a lot of biases, like, and they're everywhere, and if I'm not mindful of them, they'll drive the ship, because they're easy to defer to, they're easy to lean on. They have that sense of borrowed certainty, which is so seductive.
This is
like
why
everybody knows this.
In the cover photo that you grabbed from that you put on the live for today, it's me playing my guitar, right? In front of the classroom. This is from a science night at the museums from a number of years ago that you found on the internet. But my guitar, and this, if you can see in the really small print, my guitar has a slogan on it. And it says, "This machine surrounds certainty and forces it to think again."
I want to see that as a cartoon now. Dang it!
This is an homage, of course, to my folk music heroes. So Woody Guthrie on his guitar, he had "This machine kills fascists."
Wow.
And Pete Seeger on his banjo, he had "This machine surrounds hate and forces it to surrender." That was his.
Wow.
So mine is, "This machine surrounds certainty and forces it to think again." Because again, this is, if I'm not a PhD physicist, I'm not going to be able to teach anybody anything about quantum mechanics. I'm not going to be on a huge physics discoveries, but I think I've got a pretty good grip on critical thinking skills, even though I don't always practice them. Again, I'm as imperfect as the next guy, but I think it's, like I said, you were describing it. These are valuable skills and becoming more and more important by the day, because now living in an era of social media where you can go out and find evidence, find ideas that further confirm things you already believe to be true and count those as evidence.
Yes.
You can kind of self-select these, now. So you get into these echo chambers, and that's why your T-shirt, we're building ecosystems and not echo chambers. It really does, that means a lot to me, because that's what I'm trying to not do. And I'm trying to warn my students about how easy it is to get into an echo chamber. With my secular student group on campus, that's one thing I explicitly, as part of the design, is that we invite believers as our speakers. I've had,
Yes.
that Christian podcaster that interviewed me. Once he interviewed me in June 2024, and I realized he lived in Birmingham. Guess who was in Starkville by November that year?
Come
That
on.
guy.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
wanted to hear his story. He got my
Yeah.
story. I want to hear his story. I want to know why
Yes.
he believes what he believes. And I want my students to be exposed to that as well. We can't just be smug. I'm not going to believe this stuff. I want to know, how did other people get to these different levels of certainty? And now, of course, the other challenge is with AI.
Oh my goodness.
Social media is
Yes.
tough enough. When you're able to select stuff that other people have produced. Now, it's not even clear if other people have produced this stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Or if it's real.
Yeah. Well, like
so,
there's this I was watching this talk the other day, and I think the thumbnail was it's all just people type of thing. But there was one part of the talking point that was really fascinating to me, because it was they were talking about how AI gives these false answers that are like incredibly false, but it's like really competent. And the example that I wish I could remember the gentleman's name that he gave. He says, because AI is basically a library of everything we've ever said, and we have confidently said a lot of wrong things,
Right,
and
right.
so it's just reading the library and presenting what it gives back based on its interactions with the user and what it's learning about the user, which it's like holy fiasco. This is actually feeding directly into our biases, because it's easy to find anything that supports my bias if I want to look for it. And that's dangerous territory for us as a species right now, because like we were already dealing with imposter syndrome and Dunning-Kruger effect. Like that is about to go to a whole nother level, because like you can already hear it entering into the zeitgeist of conversation, where people are saying like, well, I just checked my AI and my AI didn't say that, or my AI said this is the actual truth,
And this
and
is what and you probably you interact with AI a whole lot more than I do, and I've been a little slow in getting into the game. But obviously, I'm not a fool. I know my students are using it, and
Yes.
the one cautionary kind of thing that I tell them is it's kind of like a calculator. Like none of us want to go back to the days where we had to write out 123 times 789 and do that all by hand, right?
Right.
And so this has to be seen as a similar kind of tool. But the important thing is, you wouldn't just punch in 123 times 789, and if it came out with 1.462,
Yes.
you wouldn't just write that on the test. If you do,
Yes.
you're a fool and you're going to get it wrong. You have to have an anticipated idea as to what a reasonable answer should be.
Yeah. That's such a good point.
And then you can use it as a tool. But if you're just going to blindly put down whatever it's, just assuming that it's giving you reality or giving you the correct answer, then you're at risk of believing something or kind of following into something that might not be true.
Can we go off the rails just a little bit, just because we're on this subject? Did you happen to come across the story that came out a few weeks ago about Dawkins' relationship with his AI?
That he thinks it's conscious. Is this correct? Yes. I think, again, I don't follow him too much, but I heard somebody commenting about this.
Yeah.
And essentially, I like the point that the person made was that he's an evolutionary biologist. What the hell is he talking about AI about? Is he an AI researcher? Is he one of the people who works for? No. And this is where all too often really smart people get themselves in trouble, because they start commenting in areas that they don't
outside of their expertise.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's
like that's actually why I love the fact that you mentioned that. That's why I didn't take a debate with Kent Hovind like 2 years ago. I was invited to debate, and at first it sounded great. I was a new YouTuber. My channel was just picking up a little success, and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna debate Kent Hovind. This is gonna be good. And I'm looking at it, and it's like we're gonna be debating creationism versus versus evolution. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not my area of specialty. Like I don't like Like I like science and all, but I literally don't know anything about evolutionary biology.
This is so fascinating because so we could have potentially crossed paths so much sooner because
that's right. You were there.
I was there because so
Yes.
who took the debate?
Well, Mandisa had got it first, so Mandisa went.
Yeah,
Yes,
yes,
and Mandisa passed it on to me, and I was going to be there too. But after I thought about it, I felt the offer from Kent Hovind was disingenuous to begin with.
Right,
and I'm like, if you seriously want to debate your ideas, you'd be debating them with evolutionary scientists, not people who are just random YouTubers. You know, they didn't even ask me what my degree was in. They didn't ask if I had a degree. It was just, you're a name coming up and we'd love to get you, you know, on our platform so we can make this seem like it is something. And I was just like, and I pissed a lot of people off with that decision. Like people were upset with me, but I was like, I can't do it. I'm not doing this. Like, if we were talking about social evolution, I'm sure, let's go. I'm there for you all day. But no, I love the fact that you called that out because it is so tempting to get pulled into conversations that are literally beyond your depth. And I think that's where the intellectual humility still has to matter. To say like, no, I can know a lot of things, but there are certain things that are not my areas to speak on. And like, even if someone's coming to ask me my opinion, I need to be very careful about why they're asking, how they're asking, and what they plan on doing with that, you know?
Right. Yeah. But, and so then the long story short is I'm glad I went because it was I knew nothing about Kent Hovind, but I went mainly to support Mandisa because I was a little nervous about, you know, from the little bit that I gathered, I thought she's going into crazy country.
Yeah, this is Klan town. Yeah.
And so I went, and I was glad I did, just to be another body there because he took on it, and after the debate, then he took us on this crazy tour all over the property, and I was just glad to have been there. And actually, the reason why I was there, partly, in addition to Mandisa, was a former student of mine, a former astronomy student of mine, had joined that little cult. He was actually living there at Dinosaur Adventureland with his family, with at least his wife, and I think his kids were there.
Wow.
And I hadn't seen him in a number of years. I'd kind of sort of stayed in touch with him via Facebook. Yeah, he would send me things occasionally, and I knew he was a believer, and he would ask me questions, et cetera, et cetera. But it was an opportunity for me to reconnect with him. Oh, he had a telescope. That was the thing. There was a telescope there at that Dinosaur Adventureland that he did not know how to operate. And he was asking me questions kind of remotely. You know, and it wasn't. He wasn't. I essentially realized I'm actually gonna have to show up there and show him how to use this thing because I can't give him instructions at a distance, sort of a thing. And so there was various motivations. The positive ending of the story is that student did eventually leave. I think it got too culty and he did leave. I'm not sure if he's still a believer or not, but he's definitely not under the spell of Kent Hovind anymore.
That's good. That's like that feels like a win.
It does. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Like that kind of took me there a little bit because I do know people who get caught up in those type of situations where like, and the video I just did today, I talked about megachurch secrets. And one of the things that I highlighted is that, you know, most people, when they think of megachurch pastors, they think of them exerting a lot of control over the membership. And in most cases of a megachurch, that's just not the case. The church is too big. It's too consumer driven. The members are, you know, highly disconnected from leadership. But the staff, they are like, for them, it is a pressure pot. Like it's pretty bad for a lot of them in those places.
Right.
But I've seen it over and over again. I remember years ago, actually, our current director of faith, whatever, I worked in Tampa for one of her elders when she used to pastor in Tampa. And like that was a common thing for her elders. Like they'd have somebody and their families living with them, like, but it almost felt like slave labor. Like they're working for them like second-class citizens. It's a really weird world when you get into some of the things that happen behind closed doors in Christianity. But I am glad to hear that they did get out because yikes. And I've never been to Kent Hovind's Dinoland. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looked like? Like what was that? I imagine it to be dingy and dusty. Am I
It
being
is. It
just
is.
biased?
No. It's out in the middle of nowhere in Southwest Alabama. Like I didn't know. I've never driven to that part of the state, and it felt like it was a mile from, distant from any kind of civilization.
Man.
And yeah, it was just weird. It felt kind of like what I would imagine like a cult compound being. And when the debate happened, like all the people that were living, like they had to show up. They had to come to their little
Oh,
worship area
wow.
in order to essentially worship Ken Hovind. To give him the numbers and
Yep.
to essentially intimidate Mandisa. By having everybody there.
Yikes.
It was weird. It was very weird.
Okay, now this makes me want to do a deep
And
dive on Kent
and,
Hovind.
and then of course, so then he took us on this little tour, and my question constantly was, if you were mistaken about this, how would you figure that out? That's one of my favorite questions.
Yeah.
And I was kind of harping upon falsifiability, and of course, as someone who wants to confirm, he was having very little of it. So we essentially wound up, pretty much just talking past each other, but
Yeah.
I was trying to introduce little seeds of doubt where I could.
Man. Yeah, that actually, like, again, like I didn't know most of these people before. I told you I only found out about Kent Ham when he debated Bill Nye. And I'd only found about Kent Hovind and Wesley Ham and some other Wesley Huff or whatever, and some others after crossing over and doing this work.
Yeah.
But
well, actually, that was one of the things I think that one of the first videos I saw about you was you said you had a video about why I don't debate apologists.
Yes.
And I watched that because for me, I'm not a debater, but I wound up, because of my involvement with the secular student group on campus,
for sure.
The Cliff and Stuart Connectley had come to our campus back in the spring of 2024.
Yes.
And I wound up being part of a panel discussion, which turned out to be essentially a debate with them. And again, I didn't know who these people were. And it wasn't until after that I started to get more of a sense. In the moment, because 700 students showed up for this panel discussion and filled a lecture hall in our old main academic building. Like the president of the university had to get involved to open up this larger space.
Wow.
So I realized, these guys have a pretty big social media reach. There's definitely an audience that knows who they are. Whereas I don't swim in those waters. I did not know who they were. But what's interesting with that panel discussion is that they had their own people recording it, because they love to pimp out whatever they can. They're
absolutely
always trying to find content, and they had their own people videoing and audio recording this. And there was also a student who recorded it just from the audience. And that was the first thing that popped up on YouTube, just the student's raw video. And it was pretty lousy audio wise, but it wound up, within days, it had like 17,000 views.
Wow.
And immediately, once the panel discussion was over, and I thought, unless I lose my job, I think it went pretty well from my perspective. I immediately reached out to the AV guy and said, can I get the content? Can I get the audio? Can I get the video? And he was very nice. The guy, he sent me the information, and I'm glad he did, because as far as I know, Cliff and Stuart have never used that panel discussion stuff for anything.
Wow.
And that because I was asked by the Christian podcaster, I met with him a couple of months after the panel discussion had gone down, and the Christian podcaster, he asked me, he said, do you think that the Connectleys thought it went well? And I said no.
Yeah.
But then in the moment, I rethought. I was like, I'm actually not sure, because sometimes we're the heroes of our own story. That's kind of what the podcaster, he didn't know who the Connectleys were. But he was like, like they likely thought it went well. And I was like, man, I would actually like to know. But it's been 2 years, and as far as I can tell, they've never used any of that footage.
Wow.
Which that in itself tells me the answer. I don't know if because if it had gone well, there would be clips all over the place.
All over the place, absolutely.
And so, but that was, so when I first reached out to you, it was partly like, I know the reason why you explain quite nicely, why you don't want to necessarily platform bad ideas,
Yeah.
elevate their visibility compared to your own, et cetera, et cetera. For me, I'm a nobody, so I didn't have to. I
I
wasn't
wouldn't say a
elevating anybody.
nobody.
But I also, I think it was, and I don't know, for them, for the Connectleys themselves, of course, they've never watched. I did a breakdown video
Yeah.
after I took that panel discussion. I essentially rebutted some things that I couldn't rebut in the moment. I didn't want to
Yeah.
seem confrontational, et cetera, et cetera. I also was able to add some extra context to things that I was doing, why I chose to do what I did. I did my falsification demonstration live in front of 700 students. And I wanted to explain why I was doing these various things that wouldn't necessarily have been apparent to the casual viewer in the moment.
Yeah.
But I hope that there's an audience for that kind of content, and that
Yeah.
content wouldn't be around had I not participated in the panel discussion. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I'm curious to know how many of the campus clubs do you think supported that event? Do you think any of the other Christian clubs were influential in helping promote that event or helping support that event?
Well, like Chi Alpha, which is the Assembly of God Student Ministry, they were the ones who
Oh.
actually made the arrangements to get the Connectleys onto campus. That's actually how I found out about this whole thing. Is that
Wow.
my club is open to everybody, and there was a student who was coming to our club that semester who was also a member of Chi Alpha. He had a foot in both camps, and he was like, "Hey, we've
I
invited
like
these
that.
Connectleys guys, and would you mind if because they essentially." The way it was first presented to me was that they were going to come to our club meeting, which was on a Wednesday evening that semester, and I was like, sure, the more the merrier. I didn't know who these people were. I thought, we barely have a dozen students for an average meeting, so if we have another 12, terrific.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until that week that it turned out that when they were out on our drill field, which is our open space, that's where the Connectleys were spending their days. They were doing this open air, confrontational, apologetic sort of stuff, and they were drawing crowds. And
Yep.
they would start. And once they knew that they could come to our club meeting, they started to advertise this as a debate. They wanted it to be we're going to take on the atheists come Wednesday,
Yeah.
come Wednesday
Yeah.
night. And so, sure enough, I think it was either your word of mouth or flyers, or I'm not sure if there was any other groups explicitly that we're turning people out. But when there were 700 students, I knew the audience was comprised almost completely of believers, and so that actually affected the way I operated, the way I strategized.
Absolutely.
But once the dust settled and students didn't drop my class the next day, and I didn't get fired the next day, I thought, well, shucks, now that I've been outed in front of 700 students and and whatever social media, I'm going to lean into it. And so actually, I contacted the Chi Alpha campus minister, the guy. He was the moderator of the debate or the discussion. And after spring break, we met just to debrief. I was like, and our first meeting, he said that he wouldn't do that again. And the reason being was that it was such a huge event. His was a small campus ministry. He was like, if they were to come back to campus, he would hand it off to the Baptist Student Union or a larger group that could handle that kind of an event.
Yeah.
But then he watched at that point I had made my little breakdown video, and he watched my breakdown video, and we met again for coffee. And the next time we sat down, he was like, I wouldn't invite them back because their apologetics were shit.
Yep.
And he, of course, he didn't see that in the moment. In the moment, 700 students, he was just trying to handle this big event. He wasn't even listening to any of the answers in the moment.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until he watched my breakdown video and he realized, oh man, I caught him on several moments where they were essentially just making stuff up.
Yep.
And I didn't call him out in the moment, but in the breakdown video, I had the time and the ability to do so, and that didn't sit well with this campus minister.
Yep.
So
that is one thing that I do find interesting is that apologists do seem to have to find a more interested audience outside of church than inside of church. Church is by far like people who are communally Christian, where they're a part of some type of community life situation. They're involved on Sundays. Maybe they're in a small group, or they do something for their college campuses. those type of Christians normally cannot stand apologists because it
Right,
makes them
right,
look so bad. Like
right.
like I remember when I was a believer, looking at somebody like Ken Ham, it was like, I want to support the guy because he's a Christian, but damn, he makes us sound really bad, And it's like, so I know, like, even as a pastor, like, I never would have been invited an apologist to preach or teach anything at my church. That
Right,
just would have
right.
been like, oh my goodness. So I've actually, I'll say that's probably been one of my pet peeves about being a public atheist. Like, atheists seem to be more interested in apologists than the Christians were. And I'm like, I don't want to talk to apologists. Get them away from me. They're
Right.
weird. They're icky. No, I'm just playing. I don't want to call anybody icky. That's too far. It's funny, but it's too far.
Well, to me, it was just very surprising because, again, I didn't know these people very well. I don't do this on a regular basis, but this guy's been doing it for decades. And then
Yes.
this is their A team, and they were just so lousy. There was nothing there. And for someone like me to be able to go out toe to toe with them, and as far as I can tell, get the better of them,
Man.
it tells you
Well,
that.
look, you've blown my mind just letting me know that, and I'm putting words in your mouth, but just, letting me know that Kent Hovind is basically running a dino slave camp. And I'm just like, whoa, how does he have that much influence? Like, who is, like, that's just mind blowing to me. But, like, it's also deeply concerning to me. But that's, dude, I don't know what to do
Right.
with that information. I'm trying
Well,
to,
yeah, of course, his reach is relatively small. Like, as far as I
yeah,
can tell, like, no one really listens or talks very much about. We're talking more about him, than
yeah,
most
that is so
people.
true.
Um,
You
but yeah,
tricked me, Bob.
but
You tricked
maybe,
me into platforming apologists tonight. Did you see what you did? I'm just like,
but there is that recognition that, hey, real people do get involved with this. Like I said, that former student of mine, who,
yes,
he wasn't my best student, but I still
yeah,
care. He's a human being, and he's got a family, and his beliefs are going to filter down to his children.
that's right.
And so, if I can play a small part in helping him to get away from some really bad ideas that could wind up matriculating down to his children, then I'm pleased with that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like, yeah, that, and I think that's a good place to circle back around. I only have, because I know we got to get up out of here. Bob might have movie night with the family tonight, and I don't want to interrupt it. So I'm gonna try to get Bob out of here in a few moments. But I do have, trying to pick which one of these last questions that I want to ask, and I think it's this one. What kind of future do you think secular communities need to build for children and families? And I think that's the perfect bridge from where we just were, because we see the need. You're in that world real time. You've been teaching students of all ages. You're entertaining students while educating students of various ages. You are a parent of students of various ages. Help us as a secular community understand why this is important and what we need to be doing to be a better resource and a better community for children and families.
Right. Well, and of course, my current bias is the fact that I live in the Bible Belt South.
Yeah.
Where, yeah, like, I was really forced to confront this, when like I said, I played banjo in a praise band, and by the time my kids were getting to be at the age of reason, my eldest son was about 7 years old, and I'm up there playing songs, that I don't believe those lyrics, and I'm hearing sermons that I don't agree with, and I'm wondering how much he's taking in at that point. And that's when I kind of stepped away, very inelegantly. I didn't really give my wife too much of a heads up about this. Certainly didn't give my in-laws a whole other story when they found out that this whole thing had transpired. Something very similar, not quite like I had dinner with my in-laws yesterday, so I'm not completely estranged from them, but things went down that weren't good, and it fundamentally changed our relationship. Again, just over the fact that I don't believe the way they believe. So again, this is further confirmation that these beliefs do inform people's actions. But actually, one of what brought the things to a head with my in-laws was summer camp, because as I was moving out of the church, I was looking for secular options, and because my son was getting old enough to go to summer camp, and around here, the only options are church camps, except there was Camp Quest. Camp Quest, which is a secular summer camp, I think it had always been operating kind of in the Blue Ridge, somewhere in North Carolina or something of the sort. But the year that my son was kind of old enough to go, they were going to do it for the first time. They were going to be offering it in Mississippi, up in Tishomingo State Park.
Yeah.
And so I thought, great. And so I signed him up, and in fact, I couldn't be a counselor there because I was working or something of the sort. Or I was touring, but I was even, I think I did a weather night, I did an astronomy night, I helped with the canoe trip that week. I was going to help out with programming as much as I could. But leading up to that, my in-laws got wind of this, and they went to the Camp Quest summer camp, and they read that it was a secular camp, and they're going to teach about science, et cetera, and they saw that as being atheist camp. And this actually that precipitated a big blow up because of that. And so that's kind of what you're dealing with here in the Bible Belt South. I can't go to a park and rec game without coaches, having my kids.
That's right.
Before a game.
Yep.
That's just kind of in the water here. We've got crosses, outside of every town. So I'm looking at things from a kind of a distorted viewpoint, but I certainly see the way forward as being away from all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just to be able to provide a space where, kids, you don't have to hold any particular belief. You just think critically and arrive at your own ideas.
Yeah.
But no, for me, I'm a big fan of Robert J. Ingersoll. Robert J. Ingersoll had this this vision of having community centers where, on a Sunday, rather than hearing a boring old sermon in a cold church, you could have an art exhibition, or you could have a concert, or you could have a speaker talking about the latest technology, or you could learn about farming, or you could just that's kind of what I envision. I see what secular community should be is a way of educating and enjoying being human together. And not forgetting about the kids. Then not just thinking, oh, this is what adults will be interested in. How about what can we also provide that would grab the interest of the kids?
Yes.
Shucks, this past week I got a chance to do model rocketry for the first time. I'd never done model rocketry.
That sounds exciting, man.
And now I'm like hooked. I'm like, well, how can I do this on a different scale? How can I get this into some how can I get some funds to shoot some rockets now that I have the knowledge?
Yes.
And I'm not scared of doing it anymore. It was exciting. It was fun, and a great way of teaching about physics and getting kids excited about, shucks, we're in the midst of the Artemis missions. Yeah, everyone should be excited about rockets. So,
oh man, I
hear engineers, from like back in the '60s, engineers from the back in the '60s were like, growing up then, they were like, how could I not be an engineer? There was moon missions, there was launches going on. It was such a part of the culture. I want science to be a large part of the culture because, man.
Do you know how that makes me feel bad that we're still early, right? Because I wish BridgeCity was institutional by this moment, because now that just feels like a missed opportunity. We should have had like a whole education week around the Artemis mission, around launch. We could have had educational activities. We could have had science fair type of stuff. We could have had all types of and I know that that's where we can go, but that's what's exciting about this. It's for the longest I've been waiting to find just other adults who even thought about the possibilities, because I'm working on a video idea about 10 regrets that I have since leaving the faith. And that is one of them. One of them is finding less people who are visibly passionate about making positive change. Even if somewhat idealistic, I'll deal with idealistic, ambitious people all day if they're actually willing to do something. But I realize so many people on this side are dealing with nihilism. So many people on this side are dealing with cynicism, and they've been burnt in so many areas that it's just like, hey, forget all of that. But so it's always refreshing to me when I come across somebody else who's like, nah, I want to do stuff. Because in my mind, I'd be like, nah, we need Like, do you know how many of our kids have to go through like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, you know, or anything that like that, just to get some type of life and just to get some type of leadership exposure, just to get some type of discipline. And like for those to be the only options, like you said, you know, even just finding a secular summer camp, you know, it's like you got to go a little bit out of the way. And that just shouldn't be the case anymore. Like, and that's
and of course that secular summer camp that requires counselors. You know, so you know, people have to, you know, people who want to make it happen have to get involved. You know, it's not going to, you just can't pawn it off on somebody else.
That's right.
And so that's why, you know, even when it comes to you know teaching and education, I love Tim Minchin. Tim Minchin in one of his addresses, you know, he says, you know, be a teacher. Even if you're not a teacher, be a teacher. You know, and he's trying to encourage, especially young men out of college, to get involved in teaching. If they're not sure what they want to do with their lives, give teaching a try, because you know that you could play an important role in a classroom. But I think that it's important. You know, if you've got something you love to do, find a way to share it. When you know when the first Camp Quest, there was a guy who was a filmmaker, and he decided to be a counselor, and so he I think he did a little bit of filmmaking with the kids. And he had a 3D printer, so he brought the 3D printer and he showed the 3D printer, and I think he had a drone too. And so he just brought that stuff because that stuff's interesting. He was interested in it.
Absolutely.
And the kids were interested in it. And he wasn't a teacher, you know, but there's no reason why you can't share your passions with other people.
That's it.
And look for opportunities, and you'll be surprised how the nihilism goes away, because this gives you a purpose, man. When you get to share with other people, then there's no cynicism and nihilism. There's education.
I want to hear a whole talk from you on this, because like, dude, you're preaching. Like this is from where I come from, this is what we call good preaching. Okay. Like, because no, you're absolutely right. Like that just gives me fire, and it gives me hope just thinking about it. Like it does give you purpose. It does redefine meaning for you. Like it's powerful.
And for humanists, you know, for me, the way I look at it is there's no help coming from that. There's plenty of problems, and as far as I can tell, there's no help coming from outside. You know, it's up to us to figure it out. And same thing with the secular community, is that you can't just pawn it off on somebody else.
That's right.
You know, you've got to, if you really want to make this happen, you've got to have some skin in the game. You know, whether that's, you know, time, money, or expertise.
Man. Bob, thank you so much for being here tonight. Like I tried to end it at 1:30, but like not at 1:30, but an hour and 30 minutes. But this conversation got really good. Let me tell you.
Go Velvet Bunny. I see Velvet Bunny in there. Black science teacher. Awesome.
And Velvet Bunny said, we got to bring you back. Like we've got like, and that's Velvet Bunny's second time saying that. So they mean it. They mean it. Like we've got to bring you back. And the good news is, Velvet Bunny, Bob is a part of our community. He's our director of children and families. He helps out on the production team. He's collaborating with the music club. Like he's everywhere. So get involved, get on the local campus, get there. We'd love to see you. Yes, I love it. I love it.
Good people.
Especially as a science educator, because like, hey, Bob is going to need people on his team, and like you may be a great person to connect with, because we're going to need it. Like I have a bunch of big ideas, so I'm always throwing stuff people's way. And so Bob is going to need a lot of people to catch those ideas and determine which one of them should not go forward. You know, like we want to do Blues Clues type of stuff, like BridgeCity Clues. I don't know, like it's just something like that. But we do need more avenues for children of all ages. We need more things for families. Bob, thank you for being here tonight. This was an incredible conversation. I definitely am going to have you back on with me. But not only that, we've got to find a way that ending talk you did. I'm going to need that on a Sunday morning, bro. Like we're going to need that conversation because that felt good, and we need more of it. We need more of it. Do you have any final words before I let you go this evening?
No, I'll plug my YouTube channel, which is Storm and Swanson. That way, if you go to Storm and Swanson YouTube channel and then go to the Critical Thinking playlist, that's got all those critical thinking videos that I've been talking about. And like I said, I do promise to get this last one, my most recent one, which I'm really excited about. I've just been swamped in trying to get my summer tour launched as well, so haven't gotten a chance to actually get the critical thinking video together the way I wanted to, but it's going to be a really good one.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, man, again, thank you for being here. Obviously, I will see you tomorrow because we have a meeting then, and then I'll see you again Sunday. Like, dude,
Thank
I
you for
love
having me.
you.
Thank you for
Eh,
having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. Enjoy your family. I'm gonna drop you into the back. Listen, everybody, like I hope you enjoyed this conversation tonight as much as I did. And if you did, the best way you can prove it, and I'm asking you to prove it because we science informed over here, is by sharing it. You can share this video. I can see how many people shared it. Actually, I don't know if I can. I've honestly never looked. Should I feel embarrassed by that? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not as techie as some people think I am. I can code, but then like basic stuff, I'm like, I don't know what this is. It takes me 5 minutes looking at my cell phone to figure out what I'm looking for. So that's me. I'm that type of old. But one thing Bob said that I'm gonna hit, and then I'm gonna let you all go. But he was just talking about how much Christianity is present in the South in the life of our children, and he said something that sparked a memory for me, and it's like, just even with the basketball games, you can't have a basketball game without the coaches leading your children in prayer. And that took me through to a moment, and it was after my first divorce, and my ex-wife had custody of my kids, but I would go to the basketball games and things of that nature. And at one of the games, I'm there, and the coach is praying, and it wasn't the prayer that bothered me. It was afterwards he charged the children by saying, "Hey, um, be mindful that if any of your friends don't believe in Jesus, they're going to be burning in hell. And so you need to do everything you can." And I snatched my son up out of there so quickly. And like at this time, I wasn't like, I hadn't come out the closet as an atheist yet. At this time, like I wasn't publicly identifiable. I was still friendly with churches, but I was just horrified that somebody would speak with that level of audacity, with that level of, I know they don't hear it as hate, they hear it as love. You know what I'm saying? I get that. I'm deep enough to be able to sit with that nuance, but I'm like, these are children, dude. Like, and that was just like, I don't want my son looking at any of his friends like they're gonna burn in hell. Like that's so weird. But I threw that memory away, and hadn't thought about it in a long time. So I'm so glad that Bob highlighted that, because y'all, that's the work that we're really dealing with. It. Like, no, I get it. The YouTube stuff is fun. Yes, it's fun. Being able to dunk on Christians is cool. Yes, I get it. But like while we're doing that, the way that we are actually losing the war is that almost everywhere that our kids turn to for support is intertwined with some type of faith-based messaging. And we're going to have to do more than just yell from the sidelines. I get it. Protesting is important, but building is even more important. And I say that as a former Black nationalist, is that one of the most critical failures of many of the movements in our community was not that we weren't loud enough. It's not that we didn't have the right information. It's that we didn't build the right infrastructure. That's the problem. You can't expect to build anything different while the people who are problematic are raising your kids. You have no idea how far that damage goes at that moment. I know. I'm telling you as a former pastor, man, that there are churches that invest in making sure that our schools are filled with teachers who are believers. Like, all of them ain't successful, but enough of them are, because it's not that hard to do. It's not that hard to do. Be an influential church and tell somebody you will pay for them to get their teaching certificate if they commit to being a representative of Jesus in those schools. That's a strong enough story to sell. And in this economy, somebody's making it easier for you to get a job. You're going in. So the big point is we have work to do. And I think we can do it. And as Bob said, we can't pawn it off on other people. We have to do it. We have to bring our ideas to the table. We have to bring our talents to the table. We have to bring our resources to the table. But I think we'll be surprised at what we can make happen in this world that we share. So that's all I have for you this evening. I'm going to let you all go and give you some nice music. We got a new song that just got recently released on BridgeCity Music, so I'll let you hear that as we get up out of here this evening. Let me make sure that this loop is on. It is. All right, so until next time, y'all, keep rising. I put that too early, but you hear me.
I don't really need congratulations. I don't really need so glad you made it. Whatever it is you have, just save it. 'Cause I can do proud all on my own. I think I'd rather see cooperation. I think I'd rather be well compensated. I think I'd rather feel appreciated. Hey, yeah, but I can do proud all on my own. I can do proud all on my own. I've bodied these burdens for so long. I've handled these demons on my own. So I can do proud all on my own. I don't really need congratulations. I don't really need so glad you made it. Whatever it is you have, just save it. Hey, yeah, 'cause I can do proud all on my own. I think I'd rather see cooperation. I think I'd rather be well compensated. I think I'd rather feel appreciated. Yeah, but I can do proud all on my own. I can do proud all on my own. I've bodied these burdens for so long. I've handled these demons on my own. So I can do proud all on my own. And I can do proud all on my own. I've bodied these burdens for so long. I've handled these demons on my own. So I can do proud all